It is late afternoon. The light has gone flat through the window and you have been at your desk longer than you planned. Your dog walks over quietly. No bark, no whine. They push their chin onto your knee and hold it there, looking up at you. You rest your hand on the top of their head without thinking about it. Neither of you moves for a minute. Then they lift their chin, turn around, and walk back to wherever they were. And something settles in your chest that is hard to name. You probably think that moment was simple. Sweet, maybe, but not complicated. Most people believe the bond between a dog and their person is built by the big things. The premium food, the long hikes, the expensive training, the things that cost visible effort. The researchers who have spent 2 decades fitting dogs and their owners with biosensors, measuring their stress hormones in real time, and putting dogs into brain scanners have a completely different answer. And it starts with what just happened at your desk. Most people assume a strong bond comes down to quantity, enough hours logged together, or to the quality of curated activities, the things you plan and arrange. Or to training, the idea that a well-trained dog is evidence of a well-bonded one. These feel like reasonable explanations. Here is the problem. When scientists began monitoring the actual biology of the dog-owner relationship across ordinary days, none of those things showed up as the primary predictors of what a dog's nervous system classified as safe. What did show up were moments so ordinary that most owners would never describe them as meaningful at all. In 2019, researchers at the University of Lincoln published a study involving 72 dog owner pairs. Daniel Mills and his team applied the strange situation procedure, a validated psychological framework originally developed to measure secure attachment in human infants, to the dog-owner relationship for the first time at this scale. They measured cortisol, social approach behavior, and voluntary proximity during controlled separations and reunions. Securely attached dogs had cortisol levels that were 31% lower than insecurely attached dogs at the end of each session. They recovered from mild stressors in roughly half the time, and those differences were not predicted by breed, training history, or how long the dog had lived with the owner. They were predicted by how consistently and sensitively the owner responded to the dog's quiet, subtle signals, not the loud ones, the quiet ones. A look, a lean, a soft pawing motion. A 2021 study from Eötvös Loránd University in Budapest added the next layer, and it is the one that changed the field's understanding of what drives cortisol regulation in dogs across a full day. A team led by Borbála Turkson tracked 44 dog owner pairs over 8 weeks using salivary cortisol collected from both species at multiple points each day. Dog and owner cortisol synchronized across the day. When the owner's stress rose, so did the dog's. But the Budapest team found that the synchrony was directional. In 29 of the 44 pairs, the owner's cortisol pattern predicted the dog's pattern, not the other way around. The dog was following the owner's physiological lead. And the strength of that synchrony was predicted by one variable above all others: not total hours together, not walk distance, not training sessions. It was the frequency of brief, responsive contact during ordinary moments across the day. A glance returned. A hand laid on the dog's back while passing. A word spoken when the dog made any sound. The dogs whose owners made the most micro-responsive contact had the lowest average cortisol across the entire 8 weeks of monitoring. The effect was cumulative. It built, day by day, out of moments that cost almost nothing. Here's the detail that changes everything. When the researchers isolated pairs where owners spent the most total time with their dogs but showed low responsiveness during that time, those dogs' cortisol patterns were barely distinguishable from dogs who spent more time alone. Duration without attunement was almost neurologically meaningless. What your dog's nervous system is tracking is not how long you are in the room. It is how often you are actually present within that time. But here is where it gets really interesting, because these micro moments are not just pleasant. They are pharmacological events. In 2017, a team at Asabu University in Japan, led by Miho Nagasawa, measured oxytocin in 40 dog owner pairs across naturalistic interactions, isolating 7 specific categories of microcontact and measuring the response in both species after each one. Oxytocin is the neuropeptide most associated with trust, social bonding, and downregulating the threat response. Long, mutual gaze produced the highest spike in both dog and owner simultaneously. Responsive vocalization, meaning the owner made any warm verbal sound when the dog made a sound, produced the second highest. Brief casual touch produced the third. Sitting in the same space without directed interaction produced the smallest measurable rise. The difference in oxytocin response between mutual gaze and passive co-presence was nearly a factor of 3. It was not proximity producing the pharmacology, it was responsiveness. Every time you meet a signal from your dog with an answering signal, both nervous systems receive a pulse of oxytocin that registers in the reward circuitry as confirmation that this relationship is safe. And this drive toward microcontact did not appear recently. It goes back approximately 15,000 years to the beginning of the domestication process itself. A 2022 genomic study from the Francis Crick Institute in London analyzed ancient dog DNA from 14 archaeological sites across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. The dogs who lived closest to human settlements showed the earliest divergence in genes associated with social approach behavior, gaze initiation, and sensitivity to human emotional cues. Those genetic changes appeared under strong positive selection pressure. The advantage was this: dogs who found human responsiveness intrinsically rewarding were more likely to remain close to human settlements, receive food and protection, and survive long enough to pass those genes on. The selection pressure was not just for dogs who could tolerate humans. It was for dogs who needed the micro-moments in the same biological sense. They needed food and water. There is a finding from this research that stops most people cold. The owners who reported the highest levels of emotional investment in their dogs had dogs with significantly higher average cortisol than owners who described the relationship in more moderate terms. More invested owners. More stressed dogs. How is that possible? The resolution came when the researchers examined not the quantity of interaction, but the internal state from which it was delivered. Highly invested owners were significantly more likely to monitor their dog's emotional state continuously throughout the day, to scan for signs of distress, to hover. And what the dog's nervous systems were reading in that pattern was not comfort, it was vigilance. The owner's nervous system, locked in a low-level monitoring state, was transmitting a continuous signal that the environment required watching. And dogs, built across 15,000 years to read human physiological states with extraordinary precision, were receiving that signal perfectly and mirroring it back. The owners, trying the hardest to protect their dog's emotional well-being, were transmitting, without knowing it, the message that the world required wariness. What this means is that the micro-moments only produce their full effect when delivered from a settled nervous system. Your dog is not just receiving the gesture, they are receiving the physiological state you are in when you make it. Your dog is not needy when they push their nose under your hand while you are trying to read. They are making a social bid using the most reliable initiating behavior in their repertoire. The 3 seconds it takes to respond is the 3 seconds that tells their nervous system the relationship is still warm and active and safe. Your dog is not clingy when they follow you from room to room. They are maintaining proximity to their primary attachment figure in exactly the way that secure attachment theory predicts a healthy, bonded individual should. Your dog is not performing when they hold eye contact at the end of a quiet evening. They are running the same mutual gaze loop that Nagasawa's team measured, opening a neurochemical exchange that no other species can initiate with a human, not wolves raised by people, not primates. Dogs alone evolved this specific circuit in tandem with us across 15,000 years of shared life. The bond is not assembled in the grand moments. It is built in the space between those things. In the glance returned. In the hand that lands without any conscious decision. In the quality of your nervous system when you sit down next to them. 3 specific changes in this pattern are worth watching for. A dog who has been socially initiating throughout their life and recently stopped may be signaling pain. Dogs in physical discomfort withdraw from voluntary contact, particularly when contact has become unpredictable or when being approached sometimes hurts. A sudden drop in social initiation in a previously contact-seeking dog is worth a veterinary conversation, not a training response. A dog who has shifted into extreme and disproportionate distress at any separation, who cannot settle unless physically touching you, or who vocalizes the moment you leave the room, is showing anxious attachment. That responds well to structured work with a qualified behaviorist. A dog who has stopped initiating mutual gaze in a way that feels different from their normal look-away, who withdraws eye contact they previously offered freely, can be showing an early sign of chronic pain, significant stress, or the beginning of cognitive decline. It deserves attention. What is the micro-moment from today that you are going to pay closer attention to going forward? Leave it in the comments. There is a behavior most owners witness every single day and have never thought to question, something your dog does that looks like nothing and passes without a second thought. The science behind what is actually happening during that moment is one of the stranger findings in animal cognition research over the last decade. That is where we are headed next. Your dog is not waiting for the next adventure. They are reading the quality of this afternoon, right now, and deciding whether the world feels safe. The answer you give them does not require a plan or a budget. It requires a few seconds of your actual attention, and whatever calm you can carry into the room with you,